There are double standards and then there are impossible standards. And right now in the media and in pop culture and in America in general, left and right, we're experiencing both. It's Rob Nelson Live.
Hey, I'm Rob Nelson. I used to host a show on Fox, and now I do a digital live stream called @Rob Nelson Live. And my whole mission is to figure out how in this time of division we can find common ground.
Speech, and they're not allowed to do that anymore.
I understand what it's up.
They be focused on rebuilding California.
Oh, it's so true. Come on. This is where this gets real. He says your headings. I wouldn't want to be black and driving in a car. Right. Point there, right? Some of what's in this music, you can't sanitize it.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Streaming at you from the virtual studio in Los Angeles and to you wherever you are on Reddit, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, any platform. Interactive as always. You guys, I talk, you guys go back and forth with me. I love to take your comments. I try to take more and more of them, but it's a lot of information to get in. So we go back and forth. Love the dialogue. Whether I respond to what you're saying or not, sometimes you guys do your own meta conversations, which I love as well. Let's jump right into it. Double standards, right? So I've always been a person that hated double standards. Most people do, right? I mean, nobody like it when somebody does one thing and then, expects you to do the other, right? But those double standards become particularly complicated or problematic is a better word when you are looking at the media. Now, in politics, I would say double standards are just the nature of the beast. What two sides, period, in any society, not just America. Let's just take ours, Democrats, Republicans. Democrats will do one thing, and then when the Republicans do it, because it's good for them, Democrats will be critical. Republicans will do one thing. When the Democrats do it, they say, oh, we wouldn't do that. And it shows up again and again and again. Both sides do it. Neither side can claim the high ground. Both sides, when it's in their best interest, whatever the other side does is bad. When the tables are turned, what they want to do, it's okay to do it. And again, it shows up in so many things, and it's almost like not even worth noting the number of times this happens, other than to note that when it shows up on your side of the equation, you tend to point it out. When it shows up on the other side, you tend not to. And I sort of, about like a year ago, got tired of just being like, pointing it out. It was almost like exhausting because it's like, okay, I get it. They did that. And now the other side did it. So they're mad about it, and probably one of the most visible ones was around the nomination of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, right? Because, the whole issue was, before this, right? So, Merrick Garland, who's now the Attorney General, when his nomination came up under Obama, Republicans were like, were like, you can't do it before the end of his term. We're about to have a new election. And then, because Democrats, controlled the Congress. And, when it was with Kavanaugh, the tables flipped. Republicans were like, we're going to do it now. We have every right to do it up to the last day he's president. Democrats were like, you can't do it. And elections coming up. It was literally a mirror image. It was each side at the time in control of Congress and the White House wanting to bring a nominee up near the end of a president's term, and the other side saying that's not legit, that's not fair. And then when called out on the double standard, they both claim, well, it's not, we didn't do that. It was kind of funny watching people try to argue they didn't do the double standard, that they absolutely did, because they did. I'm not surprised. That's the nature of politics. The nature of politics is, the nature of politics is to do what's in my party's best interest, and to claim that I'm always consistent and criticize the other side when they don't do it. They don't care. They don't care. That's why politicians are looked at so lowly in general, right? Because their credibility is like zero. They promise things they don't do. They say they're going to do things. They flip, they turn, we're like, oh, they flipped on that. Yeah, that's what they do. They flip, they flop. I mean, they make like the best floppers in the NBA look like nothing. Like, it's kooky how much they do it. I don't know why anybody expects them not to. Where I do have a problem, though, is when the media does it. I think it's a bigger problem because for a long time, we expected the media to be like a representation of information and journalism that reflects evenly to both sides. And even if there's a bias, because I hate this notion when someone goes, we're unbiased. Nobody's unbiased. People need to stop saying I'm unbiased. There is no such thing as an unbiased person or an unbiased reporter or an unbiased network. I've said this before, by definition, if I choose to talk about something, it's showing my bias because I'm choosing not to talk about something else. The points I choose to bring up in defense or against something, I'm choosing not to bring up other ones. I can't bring them all up. And you say, well, I try to be balanced. Sure, you try to be fair, but we all have a bias. So it's not about being unbiased. But even back in the day when there may have been bias, I think there was still a strong attempt to be fair to both sides, to include both sides, to at least pretend to include both sides. I'd say right now that is gone from the media. Now, I think most of the mainstream media is left of center, but it's gone on both left and right in the media. And especially when you get into the more right-leaning digital media, it's really gone. Newsmax doesn't pretend to show the other side of things, or even if they pretend to, they're not, They're not even remotely doing it, Even outlets like Vox that I think claimed, early on trying to be independent journalism, Glenn Greenwald left, who started it, and was like, it's not. And I think Vox is more balanced than most. But for the most part, the media on both sides has just lost any attempt to honestly show the other side. I will argue it's more true on the left, which is a bigger part of the media. So maybe that's why, or maybe it's because for 4 years we had Donald Trump in office. And so the left of center media piled up on that and had, sort of Trump, the Trump syndrome, like they can't think past Donald Trump. But it showed up in a couple interesting areas more recently. And I want to jump into them just a little bit because it shows why the double standard is such a problem when it comes to media. I mean, one, it just makes people distrust the media. It makes you distrust it, period. I don't care which side you're on. I know more people on the left who don't trust what they see in the media, even though they kind of agree with it. They agree with MSNBC. They agree with CNN, which CNN's the worst in that they claim to be the most objective. And there literally is no objectivity on that network. It's zero. They just don't report on things. They literally don't report on them. Or they bury them. Look, I mean, the best example of that is Andrew Cuomo, Governor Andrew Cuomo. Remember him? Remember Governor Andrew Cuomo? Remember there was a huge scandal with Governor Andrew Cuomo? You probably forgot because they didn't talk about it, right? First of all, he screwed up around the COVID deaths. He didn't just misrepresent the numbers. They knowingly hid the numbers of COVID deaths in nursing homes intentionally to avoid the Department of Justice coming after them. They lied. They know they lied. The Attorney General, a liberal of New York, is going after them for that. It barely got any media coverage in the mainstream media other than Fox. And CNN all but passed over it as long as they could. Semarco. They don't, I don't know, Semarco. Is that how you say it? They don't even honestly show their own side, the left. I think that's a really interesting point. I think that's true in two ways that they don't show their own side on the left. One is that they don't adequately represent what their side is doing that's not good. It's like that Antifa thing. I'm not saying the Antifa and the January 6th insurrection. I'm so sick of calling it insurrection. It was a bunch of people who rioted and charged the Capitol, several thousand people, all of whom broke the law, all of whom were wrong. But it wasn't an insurrection. Our government didn't come close to ending. People are like, but they had to clear the senators out. They came back 2 hours later and voted. I mean, wow. Then we're really good, I mean, like, it wasn't an insurrection. We didn't almost lose our government. Oh, but we did. Was it ugly? Yes. Was it violent? Yes. Was it criminal? Yes. Did we almost lose the United States? No. If the U.S. military had stormed the Capitol, that's a different story, because then we're taking power. We're the military arm of the United States, the most powerful army arguably in the world, or one of the two, and we are taking over. That would be potential insurrection. A couple thousand people running in with clubs and bottles and whatever is not about to undo the United States government. Not even close. Even if they had killed a member of Congress, would that be beyond horrible? Yes. Would it be near the U.S. government falls? No. I mean, remember the guy who stormed the baseball field a couple of years ago? The Republicans were playing baseball and he shot up a bunch of people, and the number 3 Republican, Steve Scalise, almost died. Remember that? They literally shot at congressmen. It was all congressmen and aides playing, and a congressman almost died. Was that a one-man insurrection? No. What if the congressman had died? He died. Would our government be able to know? It wasn't an insurrection. I'm sick of people making it sound like the U.S. almost fell. Thank God we are able to withstand a whole hell of a lot more than that, you know? Somebody drops a bomb on the Capitol during the State of the Union and wipes out most of the seated government. Now you're getting closer. Even then, you know, if you watch TV, remember Kiefer Sutherland, you know, the whole series, right? The shadow cabinet member that's, you know, kept out of the loop, kept away from one person's always kept out of a major event in the event that something goes wrong and everyone dies and they take over and become president, right? We even have a system for that. You can't take everybody. There's going to be one person, one man or woman left standing who can assume the role of the presidency in a legal fashion. One person down the line, right? Anyway, to the point, are we the left underreporting on itself? I would say when it comes to that, like they don't like to point out that Antifa is essentially an anarchistic terrorist group. Like, what is it? Okay, is it officially formed? No. Is it Black Lives Matter? No. But it's almost like they go, you know, no. But is it a legit group? Yes. Does it like anarchy? Yes. Does it start protests, riots, violence? Does it attack tons of federal buildings? Has it throughout the, you know, last year? Yes. Call it for what it is. But the other reason I think the left doesn't point out, the media doesn't point out what the left really is they don't want to represent the part of the left they don't like. So, you know, last week I had Nico House from Mi Casa Su Casa, his show on. He's a lefty. He's a far left lefty. But they don't like the Nico Houses because Nico House doesn't represent the woke mentality they want. Nico House gonna rail against capitalism. Nico House gonna say, I wanted Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders dropped the ball. Nico House was out there for Tulsi Gabbard and was like, why is the media attacking Tulsi Gabbard, right? They don't want to give certain voices on the left presence either because it doesn't fit in their neat little narrative, you know? And to the second question, did the left take part in January 6th? Did the FBI take part? I would say no. I don't know. It's a conspiracy theory possibility. I think it is odd that they are flip-flopping on what they knew and didn't know, right? The FBI originally said we had warnings after the fact. Director Christopher Wray said after the fact we had warnings. And then now last week he said we didn't have credible intelligence. It's like they're kind of switching stories. Like first we did have credible intelligence that was ignored, misinformation, miscommunication. That's always the line they use, right? The same with the Kennedy assassination, right? It was like there were credible threats that the president there was going to be assassination on Kennedy. They just didn't go through. Somehow the one person didn't get it to the other person. It's just a miscommunication. It's always a miscommunication when something really bad happens. It's like, okay, maybe interesting coincidence. It is interesting how much intelligence they had that this was an organized attack, pre-organized online, using social media platforms for months, and that there was credible evidence something was going to happen and that people were going to possibly storm the Capitol violently, and somehow the right people didn't know about it. Which leads me in my crazy part that sometimes wants to believe in nutty conspiracies to go, did they know and let it happen? I mean, that's really sick. But you know what? I remember friends of mine on the left after 9/11 who said, did Bush know and let it happen? And I was like, that's sick, but it's possible. Would you let someone attack your country? Maybe if you wanted to like be able to justify a war, and if you wanted to be able to like justify more cracking down on people and invading their privacy, maybe people at that level of power might do really twisted, sick things to keep power. Is it impossible? No. Did they know? Did they know and sort of wanted to just not get attention, knowing it really won't ultimately destroy us, but it'll create enough of a mess that we'll get Trump for sure? Possible. Back to my initial point of the double standards. So I think the double standard becomes problematic. Again, you know, so Trump's Justice Department, it comes out, subpoenaed phone records of people like Congressman Adam Schiff and others involved in the impeachment proceedings, right? And it got a lot of attention when it just came out recently that they did it, right? And it's like, well, they subpoenaed them through the Justice Department. It was one more example. Trump's using the Justice Department to be his own little thing. Now, was it crazy that they did a legal request to subpoena the phone records? Was it crazy? Not necessarily. I mean, they did it because there were leaks coming out like crazy, and they thought the leaks were coming from the intelligence community, so they subpoenaed the records. They wanted to see, and they didn't tell them they were doing it. And they wanted to see if Schiff or others were the leakers of these classified documents. They got a legal okay to do that. I get it. Is it okay? Not okay? Not sure. It's how people do things. Legally, it was okay, but is it wrong? Maybe. But the same media that went crazy on that last week seemed to ignore the fact that they had no problem that Adam Schiff during the Russia hearings was literally, without asking the department, without doing it the way they did it with the Trump administration, was subpoenaing people's phone records and stuff all the time. Like, he had his own little private thing going on, and they knew that, and they reported it as sort of as he was justified in doing it because he was trying to catch the bad guys. So again, it's okay when one side does it, not when the other side does it, Not to mention, during the whole Trump investigation, they were, the Mueller team was subpoenaing all kinds of things legally. Again, is it right? Do we want that? Maybe, maybe not. Is it legal? Technically, Schiff's was a little more shady. But the media blowing it up when one side does it, not when the other side, is where I have a real problem. This kind of plays out in an interesting way in what just happened with a story that didn't get a ton of coverage, but the Trump administration. Remember the writer E. Jean Carroll? She was a longtime contributor to Elle magazine, and she wrote a book, a memoir, and in it she accused Trump of raping her in the mid-90s in a department store. Said he took her in a dressing room in a New York department store, pulled her pants down, and forced himself on her. And he came out and denied doing it. This is why he was president. And he said, basically, I couldn't have raped her because she's not my type, which sent people off the friggin' deep end. Now, is that kind of an offensive thing to say? Sure, absolutely. At some level, does it make me think he didn't? Yeah, because it sort of seems how like Trump thinks. Like, I know rape has nothing to do with whether or not you find someone attractive. But if you're not a rapist type person, it kind of does. Because you're like, I wouldn't have sex with someone I don't find attractive. That's not how rapists think, but it is how a lot of people think. Maybe Trump isn't a rapist. It seemed like an honest comment on his part, even if disgusting. Point is, he immediately had the Justice Department under him immediately defended the president and said that because I missed a piece. She sued Trump for defamation after he said that. She sued Trump for defamation for saying that. And the Justice Department argued that the suit had no merit. And the media went crazy. The media went crazy on Trump. Trump's using the Justice Department for his own personal law firm. In fact, during the debates, do you remember Joe Biden said that? Joe Biden, during one of the debates, said, using the E. Jean Carroll example, you use the Justice Department like it's your personal law firm, referring to him using the Justice Department to argue that was not defamation on the part of the president. Cut to, you don't barely hear this story. It's out there if you look. Last week, what happened? The Biden administration Justice Department took the very suit that was ongoing, picked it up, and in a memorandum to the court, argued on behalf of Trump. The same argument. They took the exact same argument and defended Trump. Got almost no media attention. When Trump did it, you're making the Justice Department your own private little whatever. Well, the reality is, why would the Biden administration Justice Department go and defend that? Well, because according to the Justice Department, they went and defended it because they were like, well, the suit really has nothing to do with whether Trump said was offensive, nor does it have anything to do with whether her allegations are credible. The suit has to do with whether a person acting in the office of the presidency, within their office, within the rights of that office, had a right to respond the way he responded. And we as the Justice Department argue that the president, whoever the president is, had a right to respond to that and say it's not true. Whether he used crude language, whether it was offensive, isn't the point. Whether it was true that she did it, that he did it, what she accused him of isn't the point. They're like, we're arguing on behalf of the office of the presidency. The point is, so was Attorney General Barr's department. They were arguing on the side of the law, and you can like it or not like it, but they're defending the institution of the presidency. But when Trump did it, Trump's using the Justice Department and the attorney generals in Trump's pocket and doesn't care about justice. When Biden does it, people didn't go crazy, which they should. Going, why would you do that? Why would you defend Trump for this disgust? Because we're trying to uphold the institutions and the laws. My problem is that the media, I don't care about people politically picking one or the other, that the media doesn't cover it evenly. Downplays one, upplays the other. How about this? The border, right? The border is an obvious one, Cruzen, it was not wall to wall for 2 days. And I read a lot of media sources, and I know you know that. And again, Cruz, and I would ask you to see my larger point. If you can argue I'm not accurate about the media double standards, it did get limited attention, not a lot, limited. But let me go back to one that then is really clear. Governor Cuomo. Governor Cuomo, at a minimum, Governor Cuomo potentially broke laws in lying about the numbers of COVID people, enough so that the Attorney General of New York is mounting an investigation. Then on top of that, there are 6, 7, 8 credible accusations of sexually inappropriate conduct to staff members that came out. Though way more credible, way more substantial than what happened against Justice Kavanaugh. The media, you want to talk, Cruz, in back-to-back coverage. The media did weeks upon weeks of back-to-back coverage of accusers against Justice Kavanaugh before he was justice in his confirmation hearings, to the point where they had Michael Avenatti literally coming on CNN all the time talking about it. Michael Avenatti, who now is, they want to put him away for like 6 years because of his scams, right? They literally covered it to no end. From the first accusation, Dr. Blasey Ford, to the most crazy ones that he was part of like gang raping people. There was no evidence for him, and they ran with them. Cuomo's accusers are hyper credible. They're credible people. They're not even people with a political agenda. They're people who work for him. They're people who were longtime supporters of his. And their stories were consistent and had enormous credibility. The media covered it like this, except for Fox and on the right. CNN literally barely talked about it at first, then briefly talked about it, then let it go. After letting Chris Cuomo, one of their primetime anchors, bring the governor on to a love fest, suddenly Chris Cuomo couldn't talk about it because it would be inappropriate for him to now be critical of the governor, given that he has such a personal relationship. But it wasn't inappropriate for him to bring him on and do like the love fest, the bro love fest. You're the best governor ever. I don't expect Chris Cuomo to go down hard on his brother, but don't let it be only when it's positive, not when it's negative. The media coverage of Cuomo was only when they couldn't not do it anymore, and they stopped as quickly as they could. They dropped the ball as fast as they could on it. If that had been, Matt Gaetz is a great example. They gave 10 times more coverage to Matt Gaetz and will continue to, based off far less allegations. I'm not defending Matt Gaetz. I'm not defending Congressman Gaetz. Maybe he did exactly what they're accusing him of. Great. Put it out there. Blast it. But don't bury it when it's the other side. Don't bury it when it's a prominent Democrat whose the evidence against him is even more dramatic, even more substantive, even more credible. The problem becomes, Cruz, and the people like you and I, because you're more on the left and I'm a libertarian with a liberal libertarian. So you think I lean right, although truthfully, like I said before, I voted for Bernie. But the problem becomes that I don't trust the media anymore when it does it. I don't trust either side when they do it. You may say you do trust the media, but you're only trusting the media on your side. And if you really are trusting the media when they do that, why? Why? Because it fits the narrative you want? I mean, you can't possibly tell me the coverage of Governor Cuomo was comparable to the coverage of Brett Kavanaugh or even to Matt Gaetz. Yet he's the governor of one of the biggest states in the country. And what the accusations against him are significant. They are potentially criminal. They are widespread. They are longstanding. They are from multiple sources. And they certainly should be beyond newsworthy. They should be getting endless coverage if the other one should be getting endless coverage. If you're just going to, like we mentioned it, we move on, then do that with everything. Mention it and move on. No, I don't think the news media is the enemy of the people. And I know that's what Trump said, but I'm not defending Trump. Trump can say they're the enemy of the people. They don't think they're the enemy of the people, but I think they've increasingly losing credibility on all sides. Both sides are losing their faith and confidence in the media. Are they the enemy of the people? No, of course not. But I don't believe half what Trump said was true. Maybe he believes it. He still thinks he's coming back in August. I mean, the guy's delusional. Okay, not the point. Is the media operating with a double standard? Yes. Again, maybe it's Trump derangement syndrome. They got so wound up in him that anything at all they had to just go the other way with. But yes, they do a double standard of coverage around things that don't fit their narrative. whether it's, whether it's the phone records, whether it's the border's another one. I mean, again, endless barrage on Trump and what he did at the border. And again, I think having the border a strong border is important. I also think we need to create a pathway to citizenship for people here who are undocumented. Did what he do with separating families, was that bad? I wasn't a fan. Yes, I don't think it was okay. But they literally tried to ignore the conditions at the border and a lot of the policies that Biden was doing. I'm not saying Biden's intentions were the same as Trump's. I think Biden genuinely wants to change it, but he wasn't. And the media's job is not to give him a pass and go, well, he wants to do the right thing. Let's give him some time. And when he says, we can't let you in there because of COVID, going, well, he can't let us in there because of COVID. Instead going, no, you don't get a free pass. We are going to put the same scrutiny on you we put on Trump. Maybe your motives are better. Doesn't mean our job is to take your motives and therefore give you the news based on it. Biden means to make it better, so let's not beat him up because it's not. Trump didn't want to make it better, so let's beat him up. Call it out evenly. Let us decide what it means. Let us decide what the motives are. Otherwise, you're telling me you decide whose motives you believe, and therefore, based on that, which information you're going to project and which information you are not going to project or advance or push. Let me switch from double standards to impossible standards, because there's another side of this, which I would call the impossible standard, and they go together. One thing is to have a double standard. And I get, by the way, why I think a lot on the left doesn't want to do that. Biden's already in trouble. He's having a hard time he's going to have a hard time passing anything. He's got a tiny majority in the House. He's got a zero majority in the Senate that a tie break can go from the vice president. He's got a independent-minded Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who is, I'm sure if you're on the left, you're annoyed by him. I agree with that. Trump did not wear a tan suit. Somebody needs to give Biden some fashion advice. Has a again, to the double standard, right? I mean, I get that Kamala Harris is a many historic firsts, for which it should be acknowledged. She is the first female vice president. She's the first Black vice president, right? I mean, she deservedly should be acknowledged as being, among firsts. But the media is literally like on a love fest with her. It's like they won't call her out for anything, and they mention things, but she doesn't get called out. I mean, right? The LA Times created a whole thing like, we're going to do Kamala Harris coverage. It's like a fan page, basically. Like, that's just not your job as the media. Yes, acknowledge their historic first. Acknowledge them. Give them credit for it. Well-deserved. I don't care whether you like her or not, But by the way, with Amy Coney Barrett, when she was, the Supreme Court, they went the other way to bash her, to bash that she was like somehow like anti-woman and all that. Again, you don't get to decide. Let us decide. That's my point on it, And I get why they do. I get that they are worried Biden's agenda is in trouble and they want that agenda. Then just come out, for God's sakes, and say it. Crucian, someone like you, I'd say, I don't have a problem with them having a bias. I have a problem with pretending they don't. CNN, if every CNN anchor came out and said, I'm not going to pretend that I'm fair on this. I'm not going to pretend that I like both sides. I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to give Republicans an even pass. I think Republicans suck. I think their agenda is horrible for this country. I don't think they share my values. And my coverage is going to be slanted 100%. Be Sean Hannity then. Be Sean Hannity. Own it. Don't pretend. But don't claim you are somehow telling me the facts and only the facts. And on top of that, telling me in an objective fashion. To my impossible standards. Because I think we've created an impossible standard around some things, and it's becoming a problem. And where I go with this was an interesting thing that happened the last few days. If you followed with, I'm going Broadway here. I need to look this up on my phone with Lin. Okay, here we go. With Lin-Manuel Miranda and his Broadway show In the Lights. So. He, created a Broadway show. The whole point was to celebrate, Puerto Rican heritage, bring Puerto Rico, give it more visibility, clarity. And he got blasted. I didn't say Sean Hannity was fair and balanced. For God's sakes, come on, people. Sean Hannity doesn't pretend to be objective at all. That's my point. He doesn't claim that he's seen both sides. He is a one-side person. He defends his side. Sure, in defending your side, do you sometimes point out why you think you're right compared to the other side? Sure, but does Sean Hannity says, I'm not a journalist. I don't have to be objective. I don't have to tell the side I don't want. That's what I'm saying. CNN does that. Just admit it. Don't pretend you're giving me the news. Sean Hannity doesn't pretend he's giving you the news. Not for a second. He doesn't even remotely pretend he's giving you the news. Okay, so back to this Broadway controversy. And I'm trying to look up where I have this because I think one of the problems was, so I'm backing up because I wanted to read something that happened. So Rita Moreno, she's like 90 now, the Puerto Rican actress. When Lin-Manuel Miranda got blasted by people saying that his attempt to include to do the play and represent Puerto Ricans somehow was dismissive of blacks in the Black Latino community, the Black Latinx community, and he got blasted by people for not having enough dark-skinned people in the play, and a number of the performers got asked questions about it, and he came out and apologized. And he said, he literally said, I screwed up. And it was interesting. He said, he wrote in The Heights, he said, because I didn't feel seen. And over the past 20 years, all I wanted was for all of us to feel seen. So he said, I'm seeing the discussion around Afro-Latino representation in our film, and it's clear that many in our dark-skinned Afro-Latino community don't feel sufficiently represented, particularly among the leading roles. Now, I think that he is coming from an honestly true place. I really do. I think Lin-Manuel Miranda's heart is in the right place on this. And he's going, look, I didn't do a good job. But I'm going, wait a minute. What the heck are you supposed to do? You made something to try to show inclusiveness of your people, but you didn't include enough dark-skinned people, Black Latinx people in leading roles. Well, okay. So I'm sorry, I did a bad job. How could you ever meet the standard? What would you have to do? Like, well, okay, make another role for that person. Well, what about the trans community? Do they get represented in it? What about the dwarf community? Did they get represented? The little person community? They get represented? I mean, literally, like, at what point doesn't every single group, interest person who, the cisgender community, like, there's those communities all in Puerto Rico. They won't be right. You can't represent everyone. My point is only he tried to do a job to create a light to represent and show an underrepresented group of people and got criticized for not showing enough and says I screwed up. But I'm going, well, how did you screw up? How could you ever meet the standard? How could you ever be inclusive enough? Because someone's always going to feel unincluded. So what caught my eye was that Rita Moreno went on Stephen Colbert's show and was critical of the criticism, saying, she went on the Late Show and said, she said, this is the man, she said, you can never do anything right, it seems. This is the man who literally brought Latino-ness and Puerto Rican-ness to America. And she's like, I couldn't do it. I tried. I wanted to, right? She's like 90 now, remember? She's an actress. I couldn't do it. I tried. Lin-Manuel has done that really single-handedly, and I'm thrilled to pieces. Like, the guy's done it, He brought Latino-ness and Puerto Rican-ness to America. Mainstream culture showed us it. And she was like, she says there's a lot of people who are Puerto Rican, who are also from Guatemala, who are dark and who are also fair. We're all colors in Puerto Rico. That's how it is. So could you have just left it alone for a minute? And she got blasted. So she went out and apologized. I'm incredibly disappointed with myself. While making a statement in defense of Lin-Manuel Miranda on the Colbert Show last night, I was clearly dismissive of Black lives that matter in our Latin community. So easy to forget how celebration for some is lament for others. Good last point. Celebration for some is lament for others. But that's kind of the nature of life. Not everybody wins every time. I mean, if you're a sports fan, your team wins, the other team lamenting. I mean, it's a silly, simple analogy, but it's how we look at life. You get the job, I don't. I mean, yes, there's enough to go around. But I get the job, you don't, right? You're sad. You're happy for me, but sad, right? I mean, at a certain point, right? Everybody can't win every time. And what he did was a win. And what he's been doing is a win. And he has been pushing and promoting and creating a more inclusive view of America in ways that we wouldn't normally do so that we all see it more. And he gets criticized for not going far enough. And instead of going, guys, I'm doing my best and I'll keep doing my best, he says, I screwed up. She points that Rita Moreno takes his back, then comes back and says, I screwed up too. You didn't screw up. Maybe the people criticizing you are holding you to a standard that cannot ever be met. And if you keep doing that, at the end of the day, nothing will ever be good enough. And is that really what you want? Kristen, last point on this. It's an interesting one. And I take his mea culpa at face value too. I said that before. I think he means it and I understand it. But Kristen, my point to that is, you can't always represent everybody. So did he intentionally leave someone out? No, it's my point, right? What about the trans Afro-Latino represent? There's always somebody not in it. So could he have done better? Maybe, but it's never going to be enough for some people. And Rita Moreno defending him and saying he tried should have been okay. For her having to go back and say, I screwed up too. Yes, she said, therefore I missed out on, that I was dismissive of Black lives that matter in our Latino community. He wasn't dismissive of them. All Black lives matter. Yes, every single one. But you're not going to always include enough to make everyone happy. And my point is merely, if you want to go down that route, try it. Try seeing if you can possibly live to that standard in your own life. You will fail every time. You will leave someone out, something out, not be enough, not do enough. Is that really what you want? Is that really, more importantly, is that going to lead to more progressive change? No, it's just going to make people who are already resistant even more resistant. Go, I can't with these people. I just can't. You want to bring them in. We want to create inclusiveness. You want to show people why. Don't keep raising the bar. Don't keep moving the goalpost. It's Rob Nelson Live. Thanks for watching.